I'd like to introduce Stian Håklev from University of Toronto. He's a master's student, and he's going to talk about Chinese OpenCourseWare, a case study. And if you have clarification questions during, that's great, but we will have Q&A time set aside after the main presentation for questions.
Yeah.
That's all you.
Thank you. So thank you to people who have heard about it. It's commonly known as the Chinese OpenCourseWare, but there's very little known about it. And so today I'm going to try to tell you a bit more. Basically, two parts. First, I'm going to take you on kind of a little bit of a journey through how I discovered what this was and how I'm still learning about it. And then thinking about this and having a lot of different discussions with people who are researching this in China and other places, I came up with this kind of a framework for thinking about what different kinds of OERs and what their purposes are and how they're being used. And so I'm going to briefly introduce that. It's my first time introducing it in English, and I'd love to get some feedback. And I will then use that to kind of analyze how I see the Chinese OpenCourseWare project. So this is CORE, China Open Resources for Education. And for the people who haven't heard anything about OER in China, they're probably familiar with CORE. They are the people who kind of go to conferences. They write things in English. They've got also, this is the Chinese webpage, but they've got also an English version. And this is also how I first heard about this, through David Wiley's course, where we were reading about MIT OpenCourseWare, and it's being translated to all these languages, including Chinese. And I thought, that's neat, since I speak Chinese and I have kind of a long-standing interest in the country. And in fact, they were using it apparently in lots of different classes. And I thought, that's really fascinating. How does that work with different pedagogical models and curricula and stuff? And initially, so I'm a master's student at the University of Toronto in higher education and comparative education. And so initially, I want to do my master's thesis on this topic and look at, well, how do you take American courses and translate them and put it into Chinese universities? And there are all kinds of issues being raised by that. I was never able to find enough information about it, and I had to give up on that specific topic. I'm still curious. But during my research, I came across this other thing, which was that the Chinese apparently were producing large amounts of OpenCourseWare themselves. And I thought this is even more interesting, especially since it seemed that their whole production model was very different from anything anywhere else in the world. It was still very hard to find information about it, though. So taking us on kind of a backwards journey through this, you know, first of all, we have CORE, which translates MIT into Chinese, and that's fine. There is also a Taiwanese organization that does the same thing, by the way. But you know, that's fine. You can go and you can look at it, and how anyone is using it or whether they are is hard to answer, but it's clearly up there. It does exist. But then you have this Chinese OpenCourseWare. And this is from CORE's webpage, where they're introducing what they're doing. And they're saying, you know, there's this Chinese quality OpenCourseWare, and there's, you know, 455 courses, and this was years and years ago. Now there are thousands of courses, and these are developed by core lead universities, member universities, and it sounded very, very fascinating. And then you start looking at these courses, because of course they're online. Right. So one of the questions that I will be asking towards then is, well, is this actually OpenCourseWare? CORE clearly thinks it is, because that's what they're writing. But is it? We'll see. This is one of their portal pages. And there are now, so the program started in 2003. And it's still ongoing. It's run by the Ministry of Education that allocates money to different top universities to put their best courses online. Something like 400 or 500 universities have participated so far. And this is a portal page where they kind of bring all these courses together. And so you can say, I want to look at a course in economics. And they'll say, well, here's a course. Actually, this isn't economics. It's in vocational education. And they'll give you lots of information about it. You can rate it. You can leave comments. And then you can say, here, take me to this page. I want to go to this course. I've visited lots of their courses. The interesting thing is that they all use different platforms. So there's not like one EduCommons or something like that here. Not even for the same university. Every single course is its own kind of built from scratch thing, which is interesting. So they all look different. But they tend to have a large amount of information. This is one example. This is almost like a, it's called, electronics educational resource. And this page actually goes on for quite a while. So there's a large amount of material out there. And of course, I'm happy that it's in HTML because it's easier to reuse HTML than to reuse PDF. So most of there's HTML, there's lots of video, there's lots of material, right? And so this is kind of where I was before I started really looking into this. I said, okay, there's a lot of material out there. All these different universities, but why are they doing it? You know, what's the purpose? Has anyone actually researched if it's working? So I went to China and I said, what is Chinese OER? And these are students and teachers at South China Normal University. And this summer I went to a large number of universities and I had to visit with professors because there's a lot of professors in China who are researching open education. But they're not really connected to our kind of field. There's a disconnect there. And it was really interesting. I had great discussions with master students, with professors. And we're talking about these things, and we're saying, well, what's your definition? What's my definition? What are we talking about here? And there's also a lot of papers written about this in Chinese. So this is a large academic journal database, has about 7,000 journals. And if you search for the Chinese name of this project, you get a large number of articles. This is about a year ago now, there's about 3,000 articles about this project. Which is massive. And although I read Chinese, I'm not a very fast reader. So I read some of them, I didn't read all. But basically, after reading and after talking and after thinking, I came to a bit of an understanding. And that's when you start challenging the concept of this even being OpenCourseWare. The background for this whole project is arguably the expansion of Chinese higher education, which has been explosive. I taught English in China in 2001, and at that time, 5% of the eligible cohort every year went on to university. So 5% of those who graduate from high school. This year, 22%. Okay, 5% to 22% in 8 years. And of course, the eligible cohort has also increased because graduation rates from high school have increased. So during the last decade, there has been an incredible investment in Chinese higher education. You know, many campuses going from 5,000 students to 40,000 students, just building massive buildings. And in all this, they say, well, how do we maintain quality? And so actually, the Chinese translation of the title of this project is called Top Quality Courses. So they want to improve the quality of undergraduate teaching. And one of the things they want to do is to get senior professors more interested in undergraduate teaching. Because so generally senior professors, full professors, teach masters and PhD students. They do outside consultancies. They do research, but they are not very much involved in undergraduate teaching. So one of the things that the government said, the Ministry of Education said, we want you to form teaching teams with some young professors who are gung-ho about the web and are very energetic, and some very senior ones. And oftentimes they'll have like 70, 80-year-old people, the guy who wrote the first ever textbook in this subject, and we want that guy on the team. And we want to bring these people together. And they said, well, we want to move into this new age. We want to use CMSs. We want to use, put things online, both for distance education, but also for, at this university. But these professors do not want to have anything to do with computers. But if we force them to put some of their curriculum online, through that process, they will learn about putting stuff online. So that's a good thing. And of course, if we take the best courses, and we even encourage them to make those courses even better, and then share some of that material online, that can function as a great model for other teachers. So in a way, you could say that the OER aspect, the production of online materials, is also almost an afterthought, or it's kind of a by-effect. it's not the primary purpose of this program. So how does the program work? There are 3 levels: national, provincial, and campus-based. And national is, of course, the most prestigious. What you do, and you can't actually apply directly to national. First, you develop some kind of an online course. It's not an interactive course. It looks quite like an OCW. It has a curriculum. It has teaching resources. It has, a lot of static resources. It has videos of you lecturing. And then you apply to get a provincial designation. And you have to fill out an application form. You have to say, why is this high quality? Why is the teaching team very qualified? Why is the teaching methodology and pedagogics really up to date? Why is the teaching material cutting edge in your field? And so on. That's evaluated by an external group. And if you are, okay, it's cutting off the left there, but that's, okay, levels it says. And if you're selected, you get this designation, provincial, well, OER, and you get a large sum of money, at least a large sum for China, which you can use to improve this course. And you are required to put it online, freely accessible for at least 5 years. I mean, you have to maintain it for 5 years, and you're supposed to update it. It's not a stat. You're supposed to improve on this material. Then the next year, you can say, now I have this provincial one. Can we upgrade it to national level? And there's another evaluation round, and if you're successful, you get, so, on the one hand, it's a big honor. Okay, this is something that you can put on your CV. I was a professor. My course was designated as a national level top quality course. Okay, that's a great thing if you're applying for a job at another university. It's an honor for the faculty. It's an honor for the university. University on their webpage will say, we have 15 national level courses. That's a good thing. You get a sum of money, right, which is a big incentive. And when I talked to professors who had been doing these courses, they said oftentimes the incentive actually come from the department, who said, okay, we need a national level course here. Who's going to do it? Your course is pretty good. We can support you. We can get your course up to that level. So in numbers, this started in 2003, and it's still running. By now, we have at least 1,500 national level courses. And maybe as many as should be 10,000 provincial and campus-based courses. So over 10,000 OCW courses out there, which is a large number, and most of them are quite complete, right? Because these are courses that won prizes, that went through for, a revision process, that were externally evaluated, and that are quite complete. They're not just a list of, a list of syllabi, or some of the kind of thinner courses on MIT are quite skeletal, but these are all quite complete courses. Of course, still differing quality, but still. There's also 3 levels. There's the standard course, which is the largest category, and then in later years they've added vocational courses, which is something that colleges that are more applied can apply for, and they've got online courses, which is what distance education providers can apply for. So all of this material is eventually made online, but the criteria are very different for the different categories. All of this is part of something called the Quality Project, which has a large number of, I'm not going to read, but they have a large number of different things, funding for different projects that's trying to improve the quality of Chinese undergraduate teaching and learning, right? And here you see this is a diploma that your course has received the 2004 designation for top quality course. And this is something to put in a frame in your office and say, we did it. So, so I was telling you a little bit about how this works, okay? It's quite different from what I expected. And so I've been looking at a lot of these courses. I've been talking to a lot of people about them. And I've been thinking about what is the purpose. Of course, they're saying here very quite clearly it's to improve the quality of undergraduate teaching. But then when you read a lot of the literature out there, because Well, I think this project initially was quite independent from MIT. It wasn't that they were copying MIT, but clearly MIT and other OpenCourseWare projects and other open educational resource projects have had a huge impact on China, on their thinking. I mean, these people who are researching this, they're reading the English journals, they know what's going on. And so it's been kind of mixed, I think. This is my conjecture. And you read articles now that are saying, well, how good are these courses as resources for students who want to learn from them? And I said, well, wait a minute. You said that initially your purpose was to improve the quality of face-to-face undergraduate teaching in that, so why do you care if that material is good for students, right? And so I was thinking, okay, there's a bunch of different ways that this can be used. Is it, and I started to try to structure this in my mind, and actually there was an article. So basically, what I think is, if we don't know what the purpose of an OER is, then A, we won't know what to consider when designing it, right? We can't begin to evaluate the quality or measure the success because those are all relative to what's the purpose. And the purpose of an OER can be quite different. And there was an article by Mike Caulfield that actually, once again, it's a little bit left, but it says openness is reuse and openness is transparency, when he discusses the criticisms to MIT's OpenCourseWare project and says, well, maybe there are different purposes to OpenCourseWare, and maybe we have to keep that in mind when we're analyzing whether it's been successful or not. So that got me really thinking. And I gave some talks where I had a chance to think through this, and then I went to China. And I had this in the back of my mind, and I kept developing this, and I came up with a few very, very simple, very broad categories. Direct use by a learner. I'm a learner, I would like to learn something, I will go here, I will learn. I will use this to learn. Reuse or remix, and transparency, or you could call it consultation, right? You just want to see what's there. You just want to, as Mike Caulfield said, just kind of open the window and let other people peek in at your classroom. However, this was what I took with me when I went to China. In China, after talking to all these people, I had to add a fourth purpose. Production. So the process of producing the OER in itself can actually be a purpose. What does that mean? Well, production, for OER, it means that to produce this OER, you need to form a teaching team. And that's a goal. We want you to form a teaching team. We want this old professor to get involved in teaching undergrads. We want the young and the old professors to collaborate and work together. That's one purpose. We want them to rethink the pedagogy of what they're doing. We want them to update the materials and the contents. So, this isn't like MIT where they say, anyone willing to put their courses online? Yes? Okay. What do you have? We'll put it up. It's not a kind of a snapshot model. It says, well, this looks good. Now go back and rethink it, redesign it, make it better. Okay? This is a project that is aiming to transform the way your course is taught. Okay. It also, as I said, it makes you web savvy. So ideally in the future that will also be an advantage. So who benefits? Well, you benefit as a teacher. The whole teaching team benefits. Your students currently and future will benefit. So already just locally we have all these benefits, right? And in fact, there's a case study that I read from Lanzhou City University where they were talking about the process of producing these OCWs. And they're saying we specifically chose the courses in each department that would have the largest impact. Let's say the 101 course that all the professors are kind of involved in. And so by really rethinking the pedagogics and the contents of that course, we will have some kind of a positive impact on all the different professors in our department. And we will really put a focus on teaching. And we will show everyone, we will inspire everyone to rethink their own courses. So it has a ripple effect. Now, I think this is very unique to the Chinese OER project. However, I think in all cases, the production does have an effect, right? Right now I'm being filmed and I'm being streamed live on the net. Maybe I talk differently. Maybe there are things that I don't want to say because I know they're going to be archived forever. And some of the MIT professors talked about, I don't want my lectures filmed because my lecture is an experiment. It's where I make myself vulnerable. And whereas something on video should be something finished, a finished product that I'm happy to present to the world, right? I don't want to share my draft with you. So in any case, the production of an OER will impact. But the question is that something that we want? Is that part of the purpose of producing that OER, or is it an unintended effect? But to me, that was a really interesting lesson from the Chinese project. So direct use, right? I often call this is kind of one of the two holy grails of OER. I mean, we want lots of material out there. And if I want to learn about Spanish history, I type in SpanishHistory.com, and boom, I'm there. You know, I'm watching videos, I'm looking, I'm learning, and I'm just, wow, I know everything about Spanish history. To me, the best example of that would be the Open Learning Initiative. That's one of the best examples, right? It's really designed for you to go in there. It's complete. You don't need to buy any textbooks. You don't need to go anywhere else. You don't need to interact with anyone. Just sit down. You follow the prompts. It gives you lots of feedback. It's very interactive. And you can actually, and they've proven that for certain kinds of courses, it can be extremely efficient, right? Now, of course, the downside with this is that it's very, very expensive to produce. And you have to really know what you're doing. You have to have a lot of kind of educational technology, you know, distance learning theory, and it needs to be very purpose-filled. But done well, it could work great, right? Then you have the remix, which is, I would call, the other holy grail of open education. You know, that's why we're running around using all these open licenses, because we think that's a good thing, that you can take a chunk, edit it, repurpose it, translate it, put it into your own course, change the context. Now, sadly, that's something that we're seeing not very much of, I would say. And there could be good reasons for that. Connections, I think, is a good example of a site that enables that, because it's putting all this material out there, has a very permissive license, is using a very nice file format. It's all XML, it's all semantic. Still, as David Wiley was saying, we're not seeing a lot of examples of reuse yet, right? Except for translation. Another kind of an interesting example of reuse is when you're not actually taking material and editing it and changing it around and stuff like that, but you're just linking to it. But why is it reuse? Because you might be linking to a small subset of a course. And so what this is David Wiley's Intro to Open Education, which is how I got into this in the first place. And what he would do is he would find little modules and he'd say, well, this article is really good, and this video is really good, and I'll link it together and I'll create a course out of it. And so that's kind of a way of reusing as well. I call it like a reuse light. And then the last one, and this is the one that my call field really made me think about. And I'm currently studying comparative education. And I'm very interested in education in different countries. So this is the one that really resonates with me. The idea that I can go around the world and I can open these windows and I can peek in at how are Indian professors teaching poetry, how are Chinese teaching political science, how are Mexicans teaching the history of North America, right? And you can actually do all of those examples right now, right? I mean, OCW, which is one example, is in, I think, something like 33 different countries. A lot of them have video, they have textbooks. So I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And here's just a random OpenCourseWare site. So if we have these four categories then, the question is, where does the Chinese project fit in, right? And I think this is what the Ministry of Education is not even quite sure. I think they might have had one idea when they started, and it's kind of morphed, and they've, you know, feature creep, I guess. And I think they want to do everything. Because, okay, the first one, obviously, as I gave a lot of examples, they want to change teaching through the production of OER. So the OER itself, whether it's open or not, is not really, the quality of it is not relevant. But the process that people go through is relevant, right? So this could be, I mean, look at you know, busy work in schools, right? We write all these papers. We don't actually need those papers for anything. I mean, in most cases, they're just kind of put on a shelf and never seen again. It's the process of writing that paper that's seen as valuable. So that's a good parallel. That's the first one. The second one, I would argue that most of these courses are not that great for self-study, although they certainly can be used for it. We know that a lot of self-learners are using OCW courses as well, even though they weren't really designed for it either. But I would argue that if your primary purpose was to generate great learning material direct to students, you would rethink the way you would do things. For example, why would you have 4 different courses in the same topic from 4 different universities? Why wouldn't you merge that material, right? But they're not. They're completely separate and so on. But still, there are lots of Chinese articles talking about to what extent are students able to learn directly from this. Now, the reuse, that seems reasonable. You know, we have all this material out there, and you can take this video down, you can take this thing down. However, they're not using an open license. So that's interesting, because I've been talking about OpenCourseWare, I've been talking about open educational resources, and then suddenly I'm telling you there's no open license. And that's a tricky discussion, and it's tricky if you engage with it with Chinese, because they'll say, well, of course you can share it. That's the whole point. That's what the Ministry of Education said. We don't need a license to share stuff in China. We just share. That's how it works here. It's obviously not that simple, but it's a kind of a complicated discussion. However, that's clearly holding back a little bit. The sharing, and then of course the last one, which also seems to be one of the original purposes, the reference, the model, you know, being able to see what other people are doing. So to me, this 4 uses are kind of a really useful framework to think about how to evaluate, how to design any kind of OER, whether it's in a kind of a Western North American project or whether it's a Chinese project. And I'd love feedback on that model individually. Just to close up, because I'd love for some questions. One thing that is funny to me is that I've been also talking to a lot of people. So a lot of people are doing research on distance education, educational technology in China. And they all know about this project. I mean, as you saw 3,000 articles, it's very well known in China in those circles. But when I mention it, it's universally, people are extremely cynical and negative about it. I didn't find a single person, except for someone producing it themselves, who said, yeah, that's awesome. I'm so proud of China for putting all this material out there. It's a really good resource. I didn't find a single person. And of course, part of it, it's you know, kind of general cynicism with government, and nobody's really using it, and it's out there, and well, yeah, whatever. There's all kinds of problems with it, of course. I mean, you saw that they're all using individual platforms, and I heard that sometimes they'll spend about 30% of the money that they get in on hiring some external web company to design a very flashy website, because they think that's going to make them more likely to win the grant and so on. So there's all kinds of problems. But one of the things that I tried to underline when I was talking to a group of people who were quite independent, there were a group of people in Beijing who'd come together in a community. They're very savvy with blogs and Twitter, and they're producing their own resources on a media wiki. And still, you know, they had no interest in this whole project. And what I tried to tell them was, you don't really have to worry about whether this is a great project or not, or whether the quality is good or not, because you're not the Ministry of Education, right? If I was giving this talk to the Ministry of Education, I would say, well, why are you choosing to spend your money on this rather than maybe another project that was designed differently? I'm not talking to the Ministry of Education. I'm talking to a bunch of Chinese kind of grassroots students, teachers. This is a fait accompli. It exists. There is 10,000 courses out there. What you should ask yourself is, can't we use this in any way? Isn't there some good stuff in here? So what I was encouraging them to do was say, hey, you know, let's do like David Wiley. Let's go through and let's have a course on economics, and let's go through all the OCW that is there, and let's pick out the best resources. Here's a good video, and here's a good article, and let's start a mailing list, and let's go through it, and let's learn, and let's make the best out of what we have. And that would be a great case of reuse. So, I mean, one question is it a great project in the first place? Another question is, once we have it, what can we kind of do about it? So that's basically what I had to present, just a preliminary finding from my research on this project. I'm still got a year until my thesis will be done, so I'm still going to find out a lot more. But I want to share with you some of my thoughts and some of my findings. So thanks a lot, and I'd love to have questions. Well, this time I was talking mostly to master's students, and they're very different. They are actually fairly kind of interested in what they're studying and interested in getting ahead and reading and finding resources and so on. But I think for undergraduate students, it's quite true. And of course, add to that many undergraduate students in China don't choose what they study. They do an entrance exams, and then they're assigned. And they say, well, you're admitted to this faculty. If you don't want that faculty, you're not admitted. And it's not like in the US where you can kind of meander your way around. So I think definitely that's the case, that they're not used to taking a lot of initiative in going out and finding their own resources and doing research and stuff like that. And so the few people who have used it have usually heard about it from their teachers, been assigned it from their teachers and so on. Well, I mean, there's still a pretty steep pyramid. So, the percentage of people who get into masters is a lot smaller, and plus it's usually in something that you're quite interested in studying. And I guess they also see that if they want to get into the PhD or if they want to get a job, then they really need all the help they can get, so to say. They can't just listen to the teacher and write the exam. They have to blog. I mean, they're very active at blogging. I mean, I gave a few talks in China, and I would Google my name afterwards, and there was all these different people who were blogging and say, oh, there's this foreigner who came today, but here's what he said, and it's really interesting, and it's related to my research on this, and I was like, wow, that's exciting. So there's a lot of exciting stuff going on there. But on the undergraduate level, it's, because, I mean, I've been to primary schools in China, and the way that they learn is not very conducive to kind of initiative. So, I mean, it goes the whole way, right?
So you mentioned that there's quite a large increase in the number of students in the last few years.
Yeah.
We're told by CORE that there's something like 14 million unserved Chinese students who would like to get into universities. We're also told that there's not a lot of interest in distance education. What did you find there as far as respect for using distance education opportunities?
I'd say that there's a lot of interest in distance education. There's a lot of research in it. I mean, here, Rahat here is from the TV and Radio University in China that serves 2.7 million students. But in addition, you have a lot of the traditional universities that are setting up distance education schools within their own campuses. And there's a fair amount of research on it. There's absolutely a lot of unserved students. And what I found very interesting about this project, in all the literature that I've read, all the official reports from government, all the research reports, increasing access has never ever been mentioned as an objective, which you would kind of think that it would make sense. I mean, even in the US that's mentioned as an objective, and in China with 22% still being quite low, and having lots of people in rural areas, having lots of people who cannot afford, because it's quite expensive to go to university in China, you would think that giving other people access to informal learning or formal learning would be an objective, and it's never been mentioned because I don't think they see it like that. They see this as, we want to improve the quality of undergraduate teaching for those already there, and then to improve access, maybe we'll do something else.
So you said you saw a lot of benefits for produced by the production of the material, teaching the teachers how to just dedicate their time to producing a really good quality course. Did you talk to teachers who said that this changed, like how they taught the courses that they didn't?
So I didn't observe that. This is what is listed as benefits, and what some people have told me are the ideas. This is more of a policy research, and I would love to do another study, and maybe for my PhD, which would look at, choose one of these subjects. Well, as you said, are teachers actually benefiting from producing these courses, or are anyone using them as a reference, from another university to say, oh wow, I'm going to change my course? But my problem is that there was no information about this project available. And so if I didn't know what the purposes were, if I didn't know what the parameters of this program were, I couldn't start some kind of a very specific empirical study. And sadly, among those 3,000 articles, at least, there aren't many rigorous studies of that either. They're mostly kind of theoretical or idea pieces, some surveys, some questionnaires. But I would love to see more research on that, and I'm very curious myself. But I mean, to be fair, there isn't much good research on, what's the benefit of a MIT OCW or any other OCW, for example. There are some case studies and there are some, web statistics. But if you want to look at, is it really helping anyone learn, and how is, there's a lot of room for that as well. Yeah.
I only have a very limited experience in interacting with China. I'm Jane Anderson from the Department of Education and Training in New South Wales, Australia. But I have found that, very similar to many students in Australia, people there are very motivated by gaining actual qualifications. And I'm wondering how, could you perhaps talk a little bit about how this fits into that learner motivation of having a qualification?
Right.
I think we can see, or I can certainly say I've been so impressed by the progress that China has made over years recently to education and training. It's quite phenomenal, and to see that commitment, there does seem to be an emphasis on people wanting actual qualifications. So how does that sit with what you've been looking at?
So how does this kind of mesh with formal qualification? Two answers or two ideas. The first one is that if you ever are in China, go to a Chinese bookstore and ask someone to find a big one, because they are the most amazing things in the world. They're 6-story malls with only a bookstore, just packed with people. On a Sunday, you can't even walk there, and everyone's sitting there reading in the bookstore. That's fine. And the self-improvement bookshelf is the most popular. Like how to start a business, how to become more efficient. People are extremely interested in self-improvement. So that's one example of something that would be quite interesting to people that doesn't provide accreditation. If there were really good online courses in how to start your own little business, how to gain training in this and that, I think that's something that people would be interested in without qualification. But of course, you're absolutely right. Qualifications are very important. And while I'm no expert on this at all, but one thing I came across that was quite interesting is that traditionally, most universities have been public, and it's been very controlled who can start a university. But they had this opening, they have this exam that can give you a bachelor equivalency. So not just a high school equivalency, but actually, or a battery of exams that can give you the equivalent of a degree. And there was right now there's a number of very innovative and very interesting private schools in China, generally not kind of elite, very expensive, but rather by kind of social entrepreneurs starting them in a rural area where there was no access to higher education, and trying to run it for as cheap as possible. And these universities generally started as training centers for this equivalency exam, because then they don't need to certify the teachers or the curriculum or the buildings or anything. You can offer evening classes with whomever, as long as your statistics show that those students are more likely to succeed in the test, more students will come. And some of these universities that started that way and got more and more funding, and then as policy in Beijing became more liberal about recognizing these private universities, they then managed to be actually certified for some courses. But some of them are now universities with 40,000 students that were started in a village 5 years ago. And so when I heard this, I was thinking, I wonder if that's an opportunity for open education, where open education could supply all or some of that training, and where that equivalency exam could supply the credential. That's just an idea I had, and I don't know how feasible it is. Any other questions? Yeah? No?
What do you see the level of need for open education? Would it be at the K-12 undergrad?
Well, all my research is on the university level. There is a lot of different programs for this isn't technically OER, and a lot of the other stuff they're doing is not technically OER either. They're never using open licenses. Often it's available freely, sometimes it's not. There's a lot of different projects from the government, from the provinces, to provide electronic resources to K through 12. And I know, for example, they have a large project where they're installing these satellite dishes in rural schools that can then suck down material that's kind of digital material that's broadcast daily, and then they can replay it in the school. And there are large investments, but I don't know enough to actually really go into it. But I mean, just as I said, you know, our idea of OER, it's a mishmash. I mean, they are affected by how famous MIT is and how everyone's writing about this and how this is exciting, and then they have their own things and their own, and it's a bit of a interesting mishmash. You know, it's, yeah. Are we going to end?
So it's time. Thanks a lot, Stian. I know that he's on Twitter actively. You can also comment on the Internet conference site, specifically for his presentation, or any other way I see he's got his email address up there. So,
Yeah.
thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for coming.